She was the Gestapo's #1 most wanted person in France. They offered 5 million francs for her capture. She killed a Nazi with her bare hands, cycled 500 kilometers through enemy territory in 72 hours, led 7,000 resistance fighters. And when asked about killing Nazis, she said, "I killed a lot of Germans, and I am only sorry I didn't kill more." This is Nancy Wake, the White Mouse. 8-1. From party girl to Nazi hunter, before Nancy Wake became the most feared woman in Nazi-occupied France, she was a party girl. Born in New Zealand in 1912, Nancy grew up rebellious. She ran away from home at 16, moved to London, became a journalist, loved champagne, parties, and living life on her terms. In the 1930s, she was living in Paris, working as a freelance journalist. She was beautiful, charming, wealthy, through her French husband Henri Fiocca, and completely uninterested in politics. Then 1933 happened. Nancy was sent to Vienna on assignment. She witnessed Nazi brown shirts beating Jewish people in the streets, saw the terror in their eyes, saw the casual cruelty. Something changed in Nancy that day. "I decided then that if I ever had the chance, I would do everything in my power to make life hell for the Nazis," she later said. She didn't know she'd get that chance much sooner than expected, because in 1940 the Nazis invaded France, and Nancy Wake's party days were about to end, and her legend was about to begin. When France fell, Nancy and her husband Henri were living in Marseille. Most wealthy expatriates fled. Nancy stayed. "We have to do something," she told Henry. "What can we do? The Germans have won. Then we fight them anyway." Nancy joined the French resistance. At first, her role was simple. She used her wealth and connections to help Allied airmen who had been shot down escape France. She would hide them in safe houses, arrange false documents, guide them to Spain. She was good at it. Too good, the Gestapo started to notice. Allied airmen kept escaping from the Marseille area. Someone was helping them, but who? They couldn't identify her. Nancy was careful. She used multiple aliases, changed her appearance frequently, never stayed in one place too long. The Gestapo called her the White Mouse, because no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't catch her. AC-2, the price on her head by 1943. Nancy Wake had become the Gestapo's #1 most wanted person in France. The bounty was 5 million francs. To put that in perspective, that is roughly $1 million in today's money. For one woman, the Gestapo was obsessed with catching the White Mouse. They knew she was responsible for helping hundreds of Allied personnel escape. They knew she was a key figure in the resistance. But they didn't know who she was. Nancy continued operating. More daring, more dangerous. But then the Gestapo made a breakthrough. They didn't catch Nancy. They caught her husband, Henri. What happened next would haunt Nancy for the rest of her life. The Gestapo arrested Henri Fiocca and interrogated him. They tortured him, demanded he reveal his wife's location and identity. Henri refused. Even under torture, he never spoke. The Gestapo executed him. Nancy didn't learn about Henri's death until after the war. But in 1943, she knew he had been arrested. She knew she had to leave France immediately, or she'd be captured too. Her escape from France was like something from a spy movie. Nancy made 6 attempts to cross the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. The first 5 times, she was turned back by German patrols. The 6th time, she made it through, barely surviving hypothermia and near starvation during the mountain crossing. From Spain, she made her way to England. Most refugees reaching England would have been grateful to be safe, would have stayed in England for the rest of the war. Not Nancy Wake. She walked into the British Special Operations Executive SOE office and said, "I want to go back to France. And this time, I want to fight." The SOE officer looked at this 31-year-old woman, knew her reputation as the White Mouse, knew she had a personal vendetta against the Nazis. "We'll train you," he said. "But this won't be escape routes anymore. This will be combat." Nancy smiled. "Good. Act 3, the training. The SOE training program was brutal. Hand-to-hand combat, silent killing techniques, parachute jumps, weapons training, sabotage, radio operation, code work. Interrogation resistance. Nancy excelled at all of it, especially the combat training. Her instructors were shocked. This glamorous woman who loved champagne and parties was a natural killer. She's one of the best fighters we've trained, one instructor wrote in his report. Male or female, she's exceptional, fearless, creative, ruthless. When necessary, the SOE decided to send her back to France as a liaison officer to the Maquis, French resistance fighters operating in rural areas. April 29, 1944, Nancy parachuted into the Auvergne region of France. Her mission, coordinate resistance activities in preparation for D-Day. Organize scattered Maquis groups, train them, arm them, turn them into an effective fighting force. She was given the codename Hélène, though the Gestapo still knew her as the White Mouse. What Nancy didn't know was that the parachute drop would land her in the middle of the most dangerous situation she'd ever faced. Nancy's parachute drop went wrong. She landed in a tree, got tangled in the lines, couldn't get down. A French farmer found her hanging there and helped her down. "Are you all right?" he asked in French. "Nothing wounded but my pride," Nancy responded, then added, "I hope my lipstick survived the landing better than I did." The farmer laughed. This woman, who had just parachuted into Nazi-occupied France, was worried about her lipstick. Nancy met with the local Maquis leader, a man known as Gaspard. He commanded approximately 3,000 resistance fighters spread across the region. "London sent me a woman," Gaspard said, clearly skeptical. "London sent you the White Mouse," Nancy responded. "Now show me your weapons and tell me what you need." The Maquis fighters were even more skeptical. They'd heard of the White Mouse, the legendary resistance figure with a 5 million franc bounty. But this glamorous woman couldn't possibly be her, could she? Nancy needed to prove herself. Fast. Ace T4. The opportunity came 2 days after her arrival. Nancy was at a Maquis safe house when a sentry rushed in. "German patrol, they've spotted us." The Maquis fighters grabbed their weapons and prepared to fight their way out. But Nancy saw a problem. There was a German sentry positioned where he could see their escape route and radio for reinforcements. "I'll handle it," Nancy said. "You?" How? Nancy was already moving. She circled around through the woods, approached the German sentry from behind. He was young, maybe 20 years old, had his rifle ready, scanning the area. Nancy came up behind him silently. What happened next became legendary among the Maquis, and it's one of the few stories Nancy never liked to talk about after the war. Nancy grabbed the German sentry from behind. In the SOE training, she'd learned a specific kill technique, a martial arts hold that could break a man's neck instantly. She used it. The German soldier dropped without making a sound. Nancy dragged his body into the bushes and returned to the safe house. Within 5 minutes, the Maquis fighters stared at her. "Problem solved," Nancy said calmly. "Now shall we continue planning?" From that moment, the Maquis never questioned her again. The White Mouse had proven she wasn't just an organizer, she was a killer. But Nancy always said later, "I killed that man because it was necessary. Because if I hadn't, he would have alerted others, and we'd all have been killed. But I never enjoyed it. I never gloried in it. It was simply war." Over the next few months, Nancy organized the Maquis into an effective fighting force. She coordinated weapons drops from Allied aircraft. She planned sabotage operations. She led attacks on German positions, and she became a problem for the Germans, a big problem. X6, leading 7,000 fighters. By summer 1944, Nancy Wake had become the de facto leader of 7,000 Maquis fighters across the Auvergne region. Let that sink in. A 32-year-old woman, technically a civilian, was commanding 7,000 armed resistance fighters in combat operations against the German army. She wasn't doing paperwork in an office. She was leading combat raids. Nancy personally led attacks on German convoys, sabotage operations on railways, ambushes on German patrols. The Maquis fighters followed her because she was fearless, she was effective. She could outdrink most of them. Nancy loved her champagne. She never asked them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. And then came August 1944, the month that would define Nancy Wake's legend forever German. Forces were retreating from southern France as Allied armies advanced. But they weren't retreating peacefully. They were destroying everything in their path. Burning villages, massacring civilians, scorched earth tactics. Nancy's Maquis forces engaged them in a series of running battles. One battle in particular became legendary, the Battle of Montmouchet, German. Forces, approximately 22,000. Soldiers with tanks and artillery attacked the Maquis positions. Nancy's forces were outnumbered and outgunned. The battle lasted several days. Nancy was in the thick of it, organizing defensive positions, coordinating attacks, leading by example. At one point, a German tank was advancing on their position. The Maquis fighters were panicking. Nancy grabbed a bazooka, a weapon she'd never used before. Had someone quickly show her how to load and fire it, then took aim at the tank. First shot missed, second shot hit. The tank stopped advancing. Nancy handed the bazooka back. Someone else can do the next one. I've made my point. The Maquis held their ground. The Germans eventually retreated. By the end of August 1944, Nancy Wake's region of France was liberated. The Maquis had played a crucial role in disrupting German forces and helping the Allied advance. Nancy's kill count during the war was never officially recorded. She didn't keep track, didn't care to, but estimates based on the operations she led suggest she was directly or indirectly responsible for thousands of German casualties. When France was liberated, Nancy didn't celebrate. She just said, "Just good. Now where do you need me next?" Kit 7, the price of war after the war. Nancy Wake received the George Medal from Britain, Médaille de la Résistance from France, Croix de Guerre from France, Medal of Freedom from USA, and Companion of the Order of Australia. She was one of the most decorated women in WWII, but the medals couldn't bring back Henri, couldn't erase the trauma, couldn't make her whole again. Nancy tried to return to her pre-war life. It was impossible. Because how do you go back to parties and champagne when you've spent 4 years killing Nazis and leading resistance fighters? Nancy struggled with civilian life. She drank heavily. She'd always loved champagne, but now it was something darker. She had nightmares. She couldn't maintain relationships. She married again in 1957 to a British RAF officer named John Forward. The marriage lasted until his death in 1997, but Nancy admitted it was difficult. "I wasn't an easy person to live with," she said. "How could I be? After what I'd seen, after what I'd done." The French government tried to honor her with additional medals and ceremonies. Nancy attended some, refused others. "I didn't do it for medals," she said. "I did it because the Nazis killed my husband. I did it because they needed to be stopped. The medals are nice, but they don't change anything." In interviews later in life, Nancy was asked if she regretted the killing. "I killed a lot of Germans," she said, "and I am only sorry I didn't kill more." People were shocked by her bluntness, but Nancy wasn't being cruel. She was being honest. "The Germans I killed were trying to kill me and my friends," she explained. "They'd already killed my husband. They were murdering civilians, burning villages. I had the ability to stop them, so I did. I'd do it again." Kit 8, the White Mouse legacy. Nancy Wake lived to be 98 years old. She died in 2011 in London. In her final years, she was interviewed extensively. Historians wanted to document her story before she was gone. One interviewer asked her, "What do you want people to remember about you?" Nancy thought for a moment, then said, "I want people to know that I wasn't special. I wasn't superhuman. I was just someone who saw something wrong and decided to do something about it. But you killed Nazis with your bare hands. You cycled 500 kilometers through occupied territory. You led 7,000 fighters." "Yes," Nancy interrupted, "because it was necessary. Anyone could have done it. I just happened to be there," the interviewer pressed. "But most people wouldn't have." "Most people weren't married to Henri Fiocca," Nancy said quietly. "Most people didn't watch the Nazis take over their home. Most people didn't have the skills I learned in SOE training. I had all of those things, so I used them. But here's the truth about Nancy Wake that she never fully acknowledged. She was special, not because she had supernatural abilities, Not because she was born a warrior, but because when the moment came, when the Nazis invaded, when her husband was arrested, when the resistance needed leadership, she stepped up. Most people, faced with those circumstances, would have fled, would have hidden, would have tried to survive quietly. Nancy fought back. She didn't just join the resistance. She became one of its most effective leaders. She didn't just escape France once. She went back, parachuting into enemy territory. She didn't just coordinate operations. She led combat missions herself. The Gestapo put a 5 million franc bounty on her head because she was that dangerous to them. And she survived. Outlived the Nazis, outlived the war, lived to 98 years old. At her funeral in 2011, veterans from the French resistance came to pay their respects. Old men now, but they remembered the young woman who had led them. One veteran said, "She was the bravest person I ever met." Male or female, civilian or soldier, she was fearless. And she inspired all of us to be braver than we thought we could be. Final reflection. There's a story Nancy loved to tell from after the war. She was at a veterans event in France. An old German officer approached her. He'd fought against the Maquis during the war. "Are you the White Mouse?" he asked. Nancy nodded. "I am." The German officer was quiet for a moment, then said, "We were terrified of you. The Gestapo said you were like a ghost, everywhere and nowhere. We could never catch you," Nancy smiled. "That was the point. May I ask you something?" the German officer said. "Why did you do it? You were a civilian, a woman. You could have stayed safe in England." Nancy's smile faded. "Because you invaded my home, killed my husband, murdered innocents. Someone had to fight back, but weren't you afraid?" Nancy thought about that question, then gave her most honest answer every single day. But fear doesn't mean you stop fighting. Fear means you understand the stakes. That's the legacy of Nancy Wake, the White Mouse. She was terrified, but she fought anyway. She could have stayed safe, but she chose danger. She could have been just another refugee. Instead, she became the Gestapo's #1 most wanted and their worst nightmare, the White Mouse, always one step ahead. Impossible to catch. Deadly when cornered, Nancy Wake proved that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fighting despite the fear, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody expected. Want more incredible female warriors? Watch The Night Witches or Lady Death next, or explore the complete Legendary Warriors series.